For as long as video games have been around, controversy has never been far away. There are some who blame them for inciting violence, sexism, and racism in young players, while others, including many a U.S. senator, have gone a step further and named violent video games as a leading cause of mass shootings across the United States. Other, more reasonable opponents simply worry about their addictive nature and the predatory tactics of some modern game developers. Whatever your view on the matter, most people agree a video game on its own can't hurt you. But what if that isn't true? What if there was a game out there so insidious that it went far beyond the scope of just having a negative effect on players? A game that had the power to kill. A game that posed such a risk to those who played it that all traces of it had to be destroyed. This is the story of Polybius, the most dangerous video game ever created. And this is It Came from the Internet.
Welcome to the first and maybe only episode of It Came from the Internet, the show where we dive into all the myths, mysteries, and just general weirdness from the internet. And hopefully a lot of you will recognize my voice from another podcast, a certain survival podcast for people who take movies too seriously. If you're asking where is Shane, I'm looking at him.
I'm right
Hello,
here.
Shane.
Hello, Johnny.
I was about to say it's weird. I was going to say sitting across from me is Shane, but you're not. This is a remote recording.
Yeah.
I don't know why I almost said that.
I feel like I'm sitting across from you.
That's how close we are. You're never that far away. Yeah, so this is a new, we're calling this a pilot. We're going to try out a new podcast. The intention is that we will have other guests. It won't always just be the two of us. Specifically, we have a third man that's going to be joining us. We hope here usually, but he wasn't available this week. He's up celebrating the Queen's Jubilee or something, I believe.
Yeah. But he's doing it for the right reason. He's getting paid to do it.
You know what, I feel like as this is a pilot or a first episode, whatever you want to call it, it probably makes sense that it's just the two of us. So to avoid this becoming like our other podcast, let's just get straight into it. We're going to start with a topic that, I'll be honest, has kind of been done to death in regards to myths and mysteries and just, well, I was going to say it's not really a conspiracy, but just myths and mysteries from the internet. But considering this is the first episode, it's probably good to get like a big one out of the way, because it could be the type of thing that people would keep requesting. So maybe it's best to do this first. Plus, it is my favorite internet urban legend. And some people would claim it's not an internet urban legend because if you believe the legend itself, it's meant to begin in 1981. But even if those stories were true, and that's a massive if, it only got popular because of the internet. So, what does the word Polybius mean to you, Shane? If anything.
Absolutely nothing.
That's good. It'll mean.
I know nothing about this topic, which I think is the fun thing about this. I don't know what to expect.
Which won't always be the case, because some topics are just going to be more known than others. But a lot of people listening will know what I'm about to talk about. But a lot of people won't, but they'll know the word Polybius because it means a lot of different things. For some, it'll mean the ancient Greek historian and author of the histories, who interestingly was also like a major critic of like historical records that weren't verified, which kind of relates to this what we're about to talk about. It's also the name in cryptography. It's the name the Polybius Square, which gets its name from the same Greek historian. And in Greek, if there's any Greek speakers out there, it literally means many lives. But if you were a regular to a select few video game arcades in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon in the fall of 1981, it would remind you of the most dangerous video game that was ever created. Does that excite you?
Yes.
The legend is the cabinets for this fabled game started appearing in a handful of arcades in Portland in the fall of 81. Some versions of the myth put the number at like half a dozen, but all the earliest tellings of the legend you find on the internet say it was only 2. Like there was 2 arcades in Portland that had this arcade game.
And it was just Portland and nowhere else?
Just Portland. That's the one consistent, throughout all the different versions, everybody's account of this urban legend, the one consistent fact is that it was only in Portland. But all the earliest versions said it was only 2 arcades, so that's kind of what's accepted as canon. Now, I actually, I went looking, done a proper deep dive and found that the apparent home of the first cabinet was in the Malibu Grand Prix arcade in Beaverton, Oregon, which is like a franchised chain of like go-kart tracks and arcades. It's still open today, but they didn't reply to me on Twitter. I was trying to confirm if there was any truth in this machine, but it's under new ownership. It's like gone through like 4 different owners since then. Yeah. And they probably hear that constantly and are sick of it.
Yeah.
But so according to the legend, this game just randomly appeared. No real fanfare or anything. It wasn't like a big release by Atari or Nintendo, so nobody knew what it was. It just appeared randomly one day, or 2 of them appeared randomly one day. And it turned out it started to get quite a following really quickly, because it was said to be highly addictive, and there was lines forming around the machines, and even like fights would regularly break out. And then like after like prolonged playthroughs of it, maybe not after playing it, maybe from the withdrawals from not playing it, players started to experience nausea, migraines, strange nightmares, and even started to feel resentment towards video games entirely after the effect of playing Polybius wore off.
Wow. And
there's one player is alleged to have gone into politics essentially and become a crusading anti-video game activist, though I couldn't find any evidence of anybody from Portland that would have been that age in Portland in 1981 becoming an anti-video game crusader, but that's part of the myth anyway.
That's brilliant.
But so far the story isn't too remarkable. It's like noteworthy, but it won't be the first or last time like video game addiction led to some mental health problems and physical health problems. But where this story gets more foreboding, I guess, is the stories of men in black suits who would visit arcades after closing time or like really early in the morning and just go to the back of the machines and download data from them.
Interesting.
According to the game's Kynop entry, Kynop.org is a database kind of like IMDb, but for video games, for arcade games, I guess. But it's where a lot of the information from the Polybius myth actually comes from. Yeah. But according to an entry on Kynop, an arcade owner from Portland, again, anonymous, of course, he's quoted as saying, they're not interested, he's talking about the men in black here, they're not interested in quarters or anything. They just come in, collect information about how the game's played. Yeah, and there are even reports of some players committing suicide or even disappearing within a couple of months of playing the game.
Wow.
Around that same time, all the cabinets, well, depending on which version of the story, it's either half a dozen or 2, but the cabinets are one night they just disappear from the arcade.
After a suicide and some missing people? Yeah,
well, again, it depends on the story. In the first few versions of this story that made its way online, there was no suicides. It was just, it caused nightmares and paranoia and stuff. So that's the legend. What do you think so far of that story?
That's pretty cool. I really have genuinely never heard of this. But actually, now you saying Polybius and seeing it written down, to me, it's somewhere in the back of my brain it associates with that kind of like an arcade game or something. I've definitely heard that before, but that's about it. But I don't.
You might have subconsciously taken it in because it is referenced in a lot of pop culture. It's in the background of an episode of Simpsons. They're in an arcade, and there's a Polybius machine. Most recently in Loki, when Loki when Loki meets all the other Lokis, and they're in like a bunker and have all these artifacts from different universes, and Polybius is in the background there. I think the implication in Loki might be that Loki built Polybius.
Yeah.
Because there's also a reference that he was also D.B. Cooper in that series as well. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of references to like mysteries. But so in terms of believability so far, how do you feel about a story like that, about like a video game that could cause psychological damage to the users?
Especially the arcade games, like if you got a specific sound and light frequency, I could see how it would cause headaches and nausea, definitely, whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a problem at the time. Like, even you look at some old Atari games.
Yeah.
The flashing lights was so much worse than what you'd see in games nowadays because people didn't really understand epilepsy and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people would have epilepsy like they went undiagnosed, and then suddenly they're playing Space Invaders or something and have a fit in an arcade.
Yeah.
And I've never had one before, so it's automatically linked to the game as opposed to just flashing lights in a dark room.
Yeah. And then kind of the other, I can get how if it's a good game and it's addictive that it become popular, but then as a like tie that in with headaches and nausea and pre-existing mental health conditions, I can see how it can result in, you know, being associated with maybe a suicide and stuff. But then does it just fall into the same realm of like satanic panic, you know?
Yeah. Just... So you don't go with the idea of it being like an MK Ultra like experiment doesn't come to your mind?
Oh, I should have thought of that. Yeah.
Because when I first heard about this I heard about this maybe 2013, 2014 was the first time I came across it. I think that was maybe not my first thought, but it definitely came to that conclusion. But also, like, even in 2013, it was harder to verify stuff.
Yeah.
And when I first came across this story, I think it could have been on like a Reddit thread or something, and somebody had linked to a ROM of the game, like claiming that they had managed to get one of the original circuit boards and been able to take the ROM for it and put it on PC, and they had a download link for it. And I downloaded it and it started up and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to get to play this dangerous game.
Yeah.
And like it starts like an old arcade game and it has the title screen and everything. Yeah. And then like when you hit play, it just crashes and then a thing comes up saying you've been owned or whatever, or pawned. Or no, it was in April Fool's. Yeah, I think it was just April Fool's.
Okay.
It was released
what's his name, Rick Rowlands? All right.
No.
That's where I thought that story was going to go.
Same thing. You know what? It might have been before. When was that?
That was early, 2000s internet.
But I think maybe I had been reading about, I might have just come across MK Ultra around that time too, so that's probably why I was thinking.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I just finished listening to another podcast. They did a deep dive on MK Ultra, and it should have occurred to me because it's been in my recent.
You can say their name.
Sorry, the last podcast on the left did a deep dive on it, and it was really interesting.
You said it really like you were trying to avoid saying their name, like their competition.
No, I was just like, I don't know, is it cool to do that or not? Basically. But it was good. It's really good if you want to know more about MK Ultra. I'd recommend their deep dive on it because they do about 4 or 5 parts on it, and there was a lot of crazy experiment. And I had that moment of, as you were telling that story, where I thought about that, but then I thought, I don't know, but they didn't do it. Oh no, yeah, they did really crazy shit. It's one of the things you kind of think, oh yeah, MK Ultra was real and happened, but you hear it referenced so much as like a go-to. Oh, this crazy thing happened. It must have been an MK Ultra. You know what I mean? It's almost used as if it wasn't real, but it was real.
But also weirder things have happened when it comes to the American government and like psyops and stuff. Like I read a book. A lot of people you've probably heard of it because Coen Brothers made a movie loosely based on it. The Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yes, yeah.
It's John Ronson wrote it, and that sort of chronicles their, I guess you'd call them experiments from like 1983. Actually, it could be 1981, so around the time Polybius showed up to the second Iraq War.
Wow.
And some of this stuff, like obviously from the title, there's the obvious one, having guys that they thought were telekinetic to stare at goats until they killed them.
Yeah.
But the point is, they've done things not too dissimilar to the Polybius legend, because the US government had they've dabbled in using video games as a training tool with the military, and they've started doing that in 1980 as well.
Yeah.
There was an Atari game called Battlezone, and it is kind of a war simulator anyway. They worked with Atari to like re-engineer it into another game. I think it's called the Bradley Trainer is their name for it, and it's just a more realistic version of the same game, and it was used for training soldiers for targeting gunners.
Oh, wow.
That kind of feeds in then this whole idea that this might be where the Polybius myth comes from. For a period in the early 80s then, because it was known that the US government had this version of Battlezone, there was a conspiracy that the actual Battlezone that was in arcades was then being used as a recruitment tool. That they were coming, looking at who got the highest scores on it and then approaching them about joining the military. Which I buy that completely. That doesn't seem... If they're using that game to train soldiers, it would make sense to go around and look and see who's doing really well on that game, because if they're doing better than the people who are already in the army, they're probably going to make better actual tank operators. I buy that 100%. I don't think that's crazy at all.
Yeah. It's like a realistic version of is it Last Starfighter? Is that the movie?
I was going to say last Flight of the Concorde, but yeah, the Last Starfighter. Mixing up two different things.
What is it? Is it Flight of the Navigator? That's what you're thinking of.
I was thinking Flight of the Concords, the New Zealand show as well. Anyway.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Last Starfighter. That's a movie I must watch again. But anyway, the rough concept of that is a guy. Yeah, he's really good at basically space invaders, and then it turns out it's a training program for an alien fighter pilot program. Obviously, it was influenced from those stories, I imagine.
Yeah. Now there is like
but that is believable. Like
that one's totally believable, but it's when you get into the effects of the game and it causing nightmares and suicides and people showing so much antipathy towards video games after. That's where it gets a little weirder. And there's a few things people could maybe be confusing the game with, because there is people out there who at least 10 years ago on the internet swore that they played it, and they described it as being the game itself is meant to be like a space shooter, and most anecdotes compare it to the game Tempest from Atari, but with more of a puzzle or problem solving kind of aspect to it, and much superior graphics. And apparently every time you progress to another level, the psychedelic effects in the game kind of get a bit more trippy and more heightened.
Interesting.
For what reason? Who knows? But apparently that's how it played. But of course, there's no footage of it online. Yeah, which isn't inconsistent with the story, because if the cabinets did only appear in 2 arcades for 2 months in 1981, there's absolutely no reason there would be footage of it, I guess.
Yeah, and no one would have an emulator.
Yeah.
There'd be no...
the only people likely to have gameplay footage would be the people who created it, and whether it was intended to cause damage to the players or not, they wouldn't want that getting out. Especially if it was only in 2 arcades. If it was a trial run on some game and it done this, they would just try and bury it, whether they're the CIA or not.
Yeah, that really sounds like the most likely is that the game just had, there's some light frequency in it that started messing with people's heads.
Yeah. The only image that does exist of it is a screen grab of the title screen. Just it's literally just the title Polybius in a big font, the same style it's meant. There's also pictures of the arcade cabinet, and it's the same style font on that. And it just has the remaining player credits and a copyright notice of the developer. And that's there is other screen grabs of the game as well, that but all mainly of title screens, but they're all look like a completely different game. But the one I just described is the only one that's kind of accepted as canon, for lack of a better word, because it was there with the original myths. Sort of anything that appeared on the internet post maybe 2008, let's say, is generally regarded as being bullshit.
Oh, okay. So it's
because a lot of the more recent eyewitness accounts or whatever just changed the story too much. The people are like, well, that's clearly bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, just to be clear, when I say those things are bullshit and not the original, that doesn't mean I believe the original either. I'm just saying, like, it's held up as being canon, like whether the story is true or not. But I mentioned, so there is a company credited with creating the game. They're called Sinus Legion. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. There's actually no real right way to pronounce it because it's a pseudo-German compound word. It's not actually accurate, but it's
okay.
It's meant to mean sense deletion or mind deletion. Which suggests that its motives are a bit more sinister if the company that created it are named Sense Deletion.
Yeah, that's dark. That's weird.
Now, actually, just go.
Did this come from East Germany in 1982?
Well, now what it might remind you of, you've seen the Darren Brown. I don't know if it was a special or just like a segment in one of his shows where he created like a zombie arcade game. Did you see that?
I don't think so. No.
For people that aren't aware, Darren Brown's like a magician, basically, showman, a British guy. A lot of people probably know him, but he done a trick where he creates like a zombie shooter, and it's just a little arcade cabinet, and they leave it in a pub, and it hypnotizes one of the players, and then like while he's under, they bring him into a warehouse that's done to look like the game. And then he wakes him up, and they have like actors as zombies coming at him, and he has to like shoot them, and he thinks he's inside the game.
Oh, that's amazing.
It really has Polybius vibes.
I must watch that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's really good. I'll send a link. Post it on social media.
Yeah.
Want me to set up social media for this?
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
Just actually to stick with the title screen as well. So like the image on first glance, I should have actually had a link to show you, but it doesn't really matter. I think I gave a good enough description.
Yeah.
On first glance, you're like, oh, that looks like an accurate representation of the opening of a game from that time. But the biggest issue with it is the title's name is way too big for 1981.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It looks very much like how like a Nintendo game would look in 1986, which doesn't sound like that's that far apart, but in terms of how like computer games progressed, it really is. Like in 1981, every kilobyte of the ROM was valuable real estate.
Yeah.
So they tended to keep all the artwork, all the elaborate artwork for like the cabinets and the covers of video games. They weren't wasting that memory on just the title screen of the game.
Oh, I know what you mean.
There's somebody had on one of the forums, somebody had posted a Nintendo game just a pinball game. And I think it was from 1985, and it looks much closer to how Polybius looks. If you compare Polybius to games from 1981 and 1985, it looks much closer to 85. So that's why a lot of people would call it into question whether it's authentic or not.
Yeah, because it's not how they were done at the time.
Yeah. But then the other side of that is, if this was like a MK Ultra like experiment, or the CIA or the military industrial complex, their computer power and graphics probably would be far ahead of what the public were familiar with.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't the general rule that when we get a piece of technology now, it means that DARPA had it like 7 years ago?
Yeah. Like, even in simpler terms, like technology. So say like you get the latest phone, say you get the latest iPhone, Apple are probably 3 to 5 years ahead of that technology of what they're currently developing. Like they're basically selling you their old ideas that they've just refined them.
Though at the time, like the people at the forefront, think of what I just said about like it was the military went to Atari back then to develop the game to help them train soldiers. Because video games were such a new concept that it was only really people in the industry that knew how to develop them. So
of course,
maybe now, like if there was a legend popped up now of a mysterious arcade machine, well, I'd be wondering like where the arcade was, because I haven't seen an arcade in a long time. But secondly, I'd be like, okay, maybe it's way ahead of all the other arcade machines, because they'd be working with like Unreal Engine 11 or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know, maybe I'm trying to like find any anything to hold on to make Polybius sound like it could be true, because it's such a cool urban myth.
I wish I'd known more about this. This is great. but as you were saying there, like it's creeped into, like it's been incepted into my mind from pop culture and me not even knowing what it was. Like that's
maybe that's how it spreads. It's like a Lovecraftian thing. You're aware of it. You didn't play the game. You weren't alive in 1981. You didn't even hear the story about it, but yet you knew what it was.
Yeah, I imagine there's lots of people claim to have played it, even though they were never in Portland in the 80s, or they're like, oh yeah, it was also in my arcade in London.
There's absolutely loads of that. There's one, I came across one, and it was from very early on early on in terms of when they started to take fire on the internet. I guess take fire, is that even a phrase? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Catch fire. And you're exactly that. There was a guy saying it appeared in like a pub in London.
Oh, really?
Like,
that's funny.
Yeah, in like Essex or somewhere, or maybe somewhere a bit more remote, but near London. But essentially, he was just retelling the original story, but making it sound more British.
Yeah,
like it was a snooker hall in 1981 instead of a go-kart arcade in Portland.
Yeah,
and you read now, clearly bullshit. Like you just you're getting in on the myth, but you're too late. The canon has already been established. Now, and so. Just to mention, so I said about the screen grab, there is a photo of the arcade cabinet itself. It appeared on arcademuseum.com very early. It's held as canon. It's an all black cabinet with just the game's title on the top marquee. The website has updated on this website, they have like all the games listed in a class. I'm not sure what normal games are listed in, but this one is just listed as Concept, Once Off, or Hoax. It's one of those three. I guess Concept would probably pop up a lot. Concept is probably when they make a cabinet first without even having a game. I'm sure that happens where they design a really cool, like weird looking cabinet, and they're like, now we need to create a game that fits in it. Like a cabinet that just attracts the eye, basically.
Yeah,
I never thought about that. It's like making a movie, but designing the poster first.
Yeah, it's like the marketing team are ahead of the design team. So like they've come out of a meeting, and the marketing team have just gone and designed the cabinet, and the design team are like, okay, we'll have that in about 4 years now.
Yeah, and I guess it could be that, and it could be a once-off, like a test, testing a new type of game, or the third option being Hoax, which is probably the most likely. But the thing with the photo is it's very low quality. It's kind of like a scan of a photo from a newspaper. The problem with that is it's hard to determine if it's actually a fake or not, because it's so low quality, which, if you are to create a fake, that's a good way to stop people from figuring out it's a fake, by making it look like a scan of a newspaper picture, making it so flawed that you can't see the telltale signs that it's photoshopped. Yeah,
gotcha. That's the way to do it.
But what is kind of fun about this story, like, if it's all one big hoax, it's a bunch of different people hoaxing. It's not one person. Yeah. So far, anyway, it's not one person behind it all.
Sounds familiar to some theories about. Won't get too deep, but about the shape of the earth and stuff. But anyway,
could be an episode 2. Now there are loads of other cabinets have popped up later. Like a lot of people claiming that they found Polybius cabinet in a storage locker. They auctioned off an auction of storage lockers or whatever. But they're all clearly hoaxers. A lot of them, they're hoaxes, but they reveal you'll watch a video where like, found a Polybius cabinet, and by the end of the video a monster pops out or something. There's a lot of like found footage films. Or at least there was back in the day. It's probably not as popular anymore, but
in the found footage days.
Well, remember there was a period of time where that was a big thing on YouTube. Different ongoing series of kind of found footage horror stuff. Like there was a Slender Man one that went for like 500 episodes or something.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. I watched 2. That was a big thing on YouTube for a while, and I remember seeing a bunch of Polybius stuff back then. But I would say that one probably is Photoshop. And then there have been people who have claimed to have the circuit board from the original game, and people have posted photos of that as proof.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely no point even spending any time talking about that, because if you had a circuit board for the game, it means you have like $1 million in your hand because you have the game.
Yeah.
If only think of it this way. So a sealed copy of Super Mario Brothers from 1985 will go for $2 million.
Wow.
That was a game that had I don't know how many copies of that were sold, but a lot. Though it is sealed. However, a cartridge, not a boxed cartridge, mind you, because there was no box from it, just a cartridge of Nintendo World Championship, will go for $100K on eBay, or has gone for $100K.
That's
on
crazy.
eBay. That's not even a real game. It's a bunch of levels from different games that were put onto this cartridge for a tournament Nintendo had.
Okay.
But because it was only used for these tournaments, there's only 200 copies of the cartridge. So that's why it's worth money. Because anything that's rare is worth money.
Of course.
So if a feckin' cartridge that isn't even an original game that had maybe 200 copies can go for $100,000, what does an original game that only had two of exist?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that'd be worth. That would probably be worth more than Superman #1 or Action Comics #1, whatever you call it.
It's ridiculous how much someone would pay for that.
All those accounts are absolute bullshit. Anybody claiming to have the circuit board.
Yeah. Or it's so valuable that it would never go to public auction. You'd just get contacted by some crazy millionaire or billionaire you've never even heard of.
Or somebody.
It wouldn't, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. It'd be some billionaire who's the fourth richest man in the world that no one's ever heard of. Or his son or something.
Yeah.
They just arrive at your dorm room and they're like,
or it'd probably be some video game company.
Yeah. Men in black suits just arrive and just take it and just leave a blank check.
There are also some eyewitness accounts of people who claimed to have been involved in the production of the game. Now, so there's one guy, weird username he went by, but PRGO17, that's what he was called. Sometime in 2008, he made a post online where he claimed to have worked on the development of Polybius. And I couldn't verify actually where he posted this originally. I just Googled it for a while and eventually found a GeoCities, an archived GeoCities post. But I don't know where it actually originally came from. This could have been somebody reposting it there. Anyway, it's not really important. I'll just read out some of what he said because it's quite funny. So it begins, I know I will not be believed. This story will be called a hoax because I have no real information. I don't know why real's in.
Yeah.
It's in quotation marks. It's weird. Anyway, but still, I believe this must be told. I have information on the game Polybius and the subsystem called the Sega Genesis CD. I do not force you to believe this, though with this information I have learned on the human brain, terrible sentence. Though with the information I've learned on the human brain, still a terrible sentence, it is likely that with the proper video technology I could. And from there, basically, it just gets worse. He says, I was a programmer in Sega's arcade division. Suddenly, we received a request to create a game, which was very odd. This would have been ignored, but the source was supposedly a secret organization operating with some sort of government power. So this sounds like a 12-year-old who's bad at writing fiction, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I am not sure to this day what country they were working for. We were given a project sheet and a map of the human brain and how to stimulate those areas. And we're told to integrate them into the video game. So yeah, it's so badly written. It's really bad. That's the fan fiction kind of.
First two sentences is somebody not very intelligent trying to sound intelligent.
That's exactly
that type of writing.
It's when people who only watched a few sci-fi movies don't read sci-fi novels try to write a sci-fi novel.
Yeah.
It's that it's terrible. it's the, like, this, we were given a project sheet and a map of the human brain. Like, but it's funny because, like, it's such a long post, and he gives absolutely no new information. The only new piece of new information he adds to the existing legend is the inclusion of Sega, and the same technology. He says the same technology would later be used on the Sega CD, but that came out like a decade later, and it wasn't. Sorry,
it just sounds like somebody who didn't do their research and is, like, as you said, 12. Doesn't realise that Sega Saturn came out in the 90s and not the 80s. Like.
Yeah. He's just, and that's an old thing, so I'll mention that.
Yeah.
It's an obvious fake and a really bad one. It's only worth giving time because it's so bad it's funny. The user clearly doesn't know anything about game development or storytelling. He, like, even later towards the end, like, he starts using the most cliched phrases like, the monster we had created. And... at one point he says, the game testers who worked for us had odd mind problems. Like, it's such a terrible sentence.
That's such a weird expression.
People that work anybody working in game development, probably smarter than the average person. Yeah. I would guess. Maybe that's not true, but anybody I know that works in that industry, they're all very, very smart people. They definitely don't speak like, well, idiots. Yeah, like, I think the best line he uses in his account is well, he calls it a confession as well, but I don't know what he actually confesses to. But he refers to that the code in the video game activated a mind altering system. Just like, he's just putting words together he thinks sounds cool.
It's word salad. It's nonsense.
It means nothing.
But even there, like I just said, there must be a frequency in either the audio or the way the light is flashing that affects the human brain, which is he's just going a totally different direction there.
Yeah.
Like, with the technology available at the time and the fact that, they could affect sound waves and the frequency in which light flashed and possibly unlocked some way that they got into another layer of how your brain works or something. It's most likely what's the case there.
The only reason this account kind of pops up in the canon of Polybius is because he was one of the first people to claim to have been involved in it. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
If he wasn't the first to post this confession, he'd just been called out straight away. I think he was called out straight away anyway.
Yeah.
At least he gets his mention in the history of Polybius.
Yeah, that's it.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
There was another guy who was taken, he was taken more serious and told perhaps a more believable story. He claimed to have... Oh, actually, wait. Did he come first or second? I wrote this down. I just want to make sure. Oh, right. Sorry. So this user actually came forward before PG017 or whatever his name was. This guy was Stephen Roach. And he claimed to be involved in development. It was kinop.org. That's what I was trying to remember. He posted on the forums there. That was the IMDb of arcade games that I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So when the entry first popped up there, he responded in the forums saying that he had actually been one of the co-founders of the company Senescesian or Senescesian. I just don't know how to pronounce that. But like I said, made up word. So he said he had started it in the Czech Republic with a few friends who saw, in his own words, he said, with a few friends who saw programming as a side hustle. And that's kind of a red flag for me because I'm not sure programming is something anybody does as a side hustle. But anyway. And the second red flag I would say there is that, so he said he founded this company with friends in the Czech Republic in 1981 when the Czech Republic didn't exist.
It was Czechoslovakia.
Yeah. Now, I think that's easy. Like, it's the same country. Yeah. But he claims to be Welsh and he moved to Czechoslovakia when he was 15 because his parents had business interests there. And I would question that, like a British family moving to a Soviet Union state, or a satellite state of the Soviet Union in the early 80s for business interests. I guess it's not the weirdest thing in the world, but I don't know.
Yeah, unusual.
Certainly noteworthy. And like,
yeah,
you know, a lot of like famous video games, well, maybe not a lot, but at least one famous video game came out of the Soviet Union, Tetris. So one of the most famous video games.
Oh, yeah.
So that part's not weird. I just question the backstory a little. But yeah, so he claimed that their startup was approached in 1980 by a South American company, in his own words, that shall remain nameless for legal purposes, to develop a new arcade game featuring revolutionary graphics. According to Roach, the team created an addictive creative title by merging raster and vector graphics. And that's a claim other programmers have just denied would have been possible at the time. Apparently, so the sponsors of him and his friend's company were so enamored with the work being done that they decided to just like rush ahead and release a couple of the cabinets to a select few arcades just to test it on the target audience while they were still developing the game.
Okay.
So, which would explain the handful of arcades in Portland. And according to Roach, shortly after, they received news that a 13-year-old boy from the Lloyd district of Portland had suffered an epileptic fit while playing the game. Only 6 days after that, the machines were removed and destroyed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he said company directors descended on the town to assess the situation, and that probably is what accounts for the men in black suits hanging around, according to him.
Yeah.
And did I mention as well, it was from him, the idea that there was more than 2 games comes from his account. I think he said there was 7 in total that he knows of, but they were all, he still said they were all in Portland.
Wow.
Now he done follow-up interviews, but never really gave much more information. He kind of just retells the same story.
Yeah.
His account kind of changes some things. The idea of it being an MK Ultra experiment kind of disappear with his version, I would say. But then there is something of a global conspiracy because it has like a company from South America working with a satellite state of the Soviet Union exporting a game to North America. You know, it's still mysterious.
So was it South America or South Africa?
Sorry, I said South Africa the first time. It was South America.
Okay. Because instantly South America, 80s makes you think of Nazis who've hidden in like Argentina and shit. That was, but then they wouldn't be working with the Soviets, so that's right.
Yeah.
That's instant.
Well, it was working with the Soviets on paper, maybe, but like Czechoslovakia, so a lot of them there didn't like being part of that union.
Yeah. Though I suppose there was the scientists who were the ones who were taken in by the Soviets, and then they also probably after a couple of years fucked off to South America to be with their brethren, so it's possible the connection goes both ways.
Well, does this story sound more believable to you? Like, certainly more believable than the last account I read out to you, but does it sound, in general, is this something you would buy?
Kind of lines what I was saying at the start, is maybe it was an experiment and the company didn't realise, like, it was an accidental thing. And then I have stories of, and hearing that it was a boy had an epileptic fit. Like, for a company like that testing out a game, and their whole push is for graphics, so they were pushing the boundaries of graphics and ways they're playing with displays and light and frequencies.
Yeah.
To me, that makes sense. And like, that's way more believable. And then over time, that story has been exaggerated or has been Chinese whispered into different things down through the years. Yeah. So that. But
now remember, his account only comes in like 2006, so the myth is already out there. But I know what you mean. Like, yeah, his story is true, and that's what gave birth to the myth. I guess like the reason I kind of don't like his version because it takes away a lot of the mystique to it. Like, I know the conspiracy aspect. Like in his version, it's just the game. It was a kind of a test run for the game because the financiers just really liked the work being done and they just wanted the public to see it and to get some feedback. And then one kid has an epileptic fit and it just ruins everything. And like part of me is like, well, that doesn't sound like a fake account, because if you wanted to like become part of the hoax, why would you make the hoax less cool? Like less creepy and less mysterious. But then maybe it's a hoaxer that just likes ruining things for people. Yeah, I'm going to come in and tell a really plausible story.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to make it sound more believable.
I do question, just because the backstory is why I would question some of it.
That's the least believable part of that whole story. Which is funny. Yeah. But also not beyond the realm of possibility. Like, people did do shit like that. But yeah,
and it's also the part, his reluctance to name the companies as a South American company that shall remain nameless for legal purposes. Like, well, what legal purposes? Like, you can't be sued for saying you worked for, like, if you had a company that were contracted to make a game for somebody, there's no way they can sue you for just saying that you once had that contract.
Yeah, and
so I feel like he's kind of implying they're a shady company. He's sprinkling in a little bit of mystery, but trying to make it sound more plausible.
Yeah. Was it Hydra?
Yeah.
But as well, like, say, like if you worked for a company, 2006, so it's, at that stage, it's 20 years ago and 20 years ago, they were directly responsible for a kid, not even says dying, but just having an epileptic fit. And maybe there was a lawsuit by a family. Like 20 years later, you're not going to give a fuck. Like, why?
Well, what I was going to say there, I don't think, because it's 1981, I doubt they would be considered directly responsible, because the understanding of the flashing lights in these games having an effect on somebody with epilepsy, just wasn't known. I don't know when games and movies started having the flashing light warning, but I remember being a kid and not seeing them on video game. I remember I can't pinpoint the time, but I definitely know that there was a time in my life where I started to notice those warnings appear on things.
Me too, yeah. I would say mid to late 90s. Just from, literally just from experience of life, not from, I'm not going to research that. Just saying, that's what I would.
So I know in 1997, famously in Japan, there was an incident that became known as a Pokemon shock.
Oh, yeah.
Where there was an episode of Pokemon that there was a strobe effect, and it caused like tens of thousands of children to have seizures, and caused widespread panic. And they showed Pokemon was cancelled for 4 months, or on hiatus for 4 months, and nearly got cancelled because they thought the entire show was doing this. That episode was banned, and the studio destroyed it or whatever. Wow. Which also, by the way, was a big joke in The Simpsons when they go to Japan.
Oh yeah, it's like seizure television.
Watching Pokemon, and
it's a seizure show, or seizure robot happy hour or something like that. Because for a second I thought you were talking about in the Pokemon games. Because when you're playing the games, like the classic Pokemon games, it was like Pokemon Blue, Red, was it Gold or Yellow or Gold or whatever it's called. When you go into an attack, it the whole screen blinks, or when you're hit with an attack, I think it's when the Pokemon you're playing with is killed, it's just bling, 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 and it's real flashy. And I thought that's what you meant, but of course it's the episode of the cartoon. I didn't even think of that. Like
me, you are Irish. You went to school in Ireland. Yes. If there was a kid in your class that had a seizure watching Pokemon, when would the bullying end? What age would he be before people stopped bullying him about
being a little pussy? No, I'm saying that speaking as a 12-year-old in the 90s, not as me.
Yes, of course.
As a 12-year-old bully in the 90s. I don't know when that would end. You'd just be called weak for so long. Everyone I can't believe you, from playing a game or watching a TV show. Oh my God.
I've told you this story before, but relating to that in no real way, but principal in primary school used to smoke roll-ups in the class as he was teaching, because it was 90s Ireland. Nobody gave a shit. There was one kid who had asthma, and like his mother complained, and so our principal no longer could smoke in class anymore. He used to have to go out for a cigarette, or he'd smoke out the window. Like, he'd give us some work to do, and then he'd go over, open the window, and just stand smoking out the window. And we, like, I can't remember the kid's name, but let's say he was Michael Kelly. We're like, oh, freaking Kelly, you pussy, you can't even stand a bit of smoke. We bullied this kid. Not bullied, but it probably doesn't actually constitute as bully.
Berated, yeah.
We teased him because his mother complained about him not wanting to be around secondhand cigarette smoke, which is the most reasonable thing in the world.
I know, yeah. Like now.
But like, we turned it, like... But even then it was reasonable. It's just like kids will take any weakness and make it into like something to torment you with. It's just funny. But the point was, Pokemon cause seizures, so perhaps this video game could have too. It's very hard to record when a dog is looking for attention. You can probably hear him.
His ears flapping. He's like straight up trying to get in.
Oh, Jesus, Leroy. But yeah, so his account of it just causing an epileptic fit in one kid, it's quite plausible, I guess.
Yeah.
The only things that would make me question his story is, well, I question it because I question the existence of Polybius anyway, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the first parts and the setting of it that make me question it. The moving to Czech Republic and all that. But what is kind of an interesting aside, so as you can imagine, there aren't many Stephen Roaches living in the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
This one claims to currently reside there. But if you look for him online, if you're to do a search and like look through all the results, you will find one who made the news in 1998.
Wow.
Which, interestingly, not around the same time, or maybe around the same time Polybius is said to have made its way onto the web.
Yeah.
So I'll read you the article, the first line of an article from why this Stephen Roach made the news. This is from the Intrepid Net Reporter, December 12th, 1998. Morova Academy Security Director Stephen Roach missing in Czech Republic. Czech officials told Intrepid Net today that they have been unable to find Stephen Roach for more than a week and are preparing an arrest warrant for violating bail conditions. Stephen Roach was the security director of Morova Academy in a place I can't pronounce in Czech Republic. He was arrested in November along with his wife, Glenda, and 2 Czech citizens and charged with a variety of offences, including child torture.
Oh my God.
You didn't see it going that there, did you?
No. I thought you were going to say he was killed under mysterious circumstances. His black unmarked car was the last thing seen at the scene or something. But
maybe it's a smear campaign to hide the truth. I'm not saying this is the same Stephen Roach, though one journalist, and I should have written down her name, but I'll confirm it. Maybe in the second part I'll confirm it. She does claim to have proof that they're the same person, but has yet to present it.
Yeah.
But either way, this Roach and his wife are American, not Welsh.
Yeah.
And they're both former police officers.
Okay.
But it is interesting that a hoaxer would choose the same name of this guy who, like, if this was a hoaxer pretending to be in the Czech, pretending to be called Stephen Roach, it is interesting that he took the name of an actual guy named Stephen Roach in the Czech Republic.
And
it's very weird.
Every time you say Stephen Roach, I'm just like, it's such a common Irish name. I think.
Yeah, well, I was like, do I know a Stephen Roach?
I know. I was going through exactly that, and I was like, I definitely went to school with a Stephen Roach. And I think a Stephen Roach isn't there this famous cyclist? It's Stephen Roach, isn't he?
Well, for a second, I was actually about to be like, wait a minute, don't you know Stephen Roach, Shane? Because for some reason, a lot of your friends are named Stephen, and there's one of them that I thought for a second was named Stephen Roach.
Do you know what? I questioned that myself too. So.
But yeah, I don't know. I found that interesting. What is more, or what else is interesting about that is that this Stephen Roach, the child torture Stephen Roach, he was in the Czech press. You know, Polybius is all about, you know, MK Ultra, mind control, all that. He was referred to, the sort of nickname the press gave him was the mentor of mind control.
Oh my God, that's insane.
But yeah, and this couple, they fled the country to escape charges. They also fled Mexico in 1996 for the same reasons. They were running a school there too, and are assumed to be living in the Bahamas under assumed identities. But it seems like a lot of people actually know where they are. But yeah, they were basically running like schools for children, like special schools and stuff, and we're just I don't even want to get into it because that's not the topic of this episode, but like weird stuff.
Wow.
I think mostly psychological torture, and yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, so odd.
But like, I was looking up, there is actually a website called, what's the name? The school is like Morova Academy, and it's like survivors of MorovaAcademy.org.
Holy shit.
And there's accounts of people who are like, were sent over there, like it's a boarding school essentially, and there's people from like America that were sent there, and this couple were running it and just like getting into all sorts of nasty shit. Again, like I know I just went on that's a huge detour from what we're talking about, but for some reason I got fascinated with the idea. I just, as common as Stephen Roach might be in Ireland, it's very uncommon in the Czech Republic, and for there to be two, and just for them to come around the same time and both like involve mind control, I just think that's a mad coincidence.
Yeah. So do you think that he just jumped on this bandwagon because he's fascinated with mind control stuff and decided to try and throw his name in it to whatever? I don't know.
Well, I was thinking, like, is it like some weird deluded way to try and make it, is this the actual Stephen Roach? And he's like, I'll tell this Polybius story, and then the other stuff that comes up, is he trying to like do a Conor McGregor and change the Google results essentially? Like every time a bad news story is about to come out about Conor McGregor, he'll tweet that he's retiring, because that way when people search him, the first news result will be him retiring and not the horrible shit he's done. So I was thinking, is it something like that, or is he going with, is it a way to say, oh, everything you've read before this, that's them trying to ruin my reputation so as I'm not taken seriously?
Yeah. It's
it could be either.
That's smart. Or is he genuine and they're trying to ruin his reputation?
It could be. Now,
I don't want to turn into a conspiracy podcast, but
no, I mean, I can answer that. Well, like, it's not an answer, but well, actually, whether they're the same people or not, they could be the same people. But I can pretty much say with like 99.999% certainty that everything Stephen Roach, whether it's his real name or not, has said in relation to him working on Polybius is absolutely untrue.
Yeah.
And I'll explain why next time, because I think that's a good place to wrap up for part one of Polybius.
Yeah.
I think it deserves two parts because there's still a lot to talk about. Before we leave, any thoughts on it? Or any new thoughts other than what you had in the beginning?
Wow, now you've given me so much to think about now.
I can cut that out. You don't need to answer it.
No. You've given me so much to think about. I need to digest this more, and then I'll give you some more thoughts in part two, I think.
And in part two, we'll go through more the timeline of the legend itself to try and figure out where it originated. And we can like try and solve the case as best we can. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for now. You know, the usual, if you've listened to us or any other podcast, you know the drill. Subscribe, rate, review. If whatever app you're listening to us on allows reviews, because that shit really helps.
Big time.
Especially in the early stages. Like, this is the first episode, so it'd be great to get a bunch of reviews or even just ratings early on. And I'm going to be real honest, if, after like 6 episodes of this, tops, if we're not like in the top of a lot of charts, I'll pull the plug. Like,
Yeah, it's not worth the effort at that point.
Yeah, this ain't like, because we're still planning. We're still doing disaster artists. We're not just hanging our hat. This is just an extra one. This is something new.
Yeah.
Basically, we can't just talk about the apocalypse and disaster movies. We need to have other conversations. But we need to start topping some charts pretty quickly if you want to continue to hear it. So tell your friends, tell your dad, and if you have any experience with Polybius or any other mysterious arcade games, get in touch with us. And yeah, I guess all our social media links we'll put a link in the description with all our other links.
Yeah.
I haven't set up anything yet, but we will. And I guess, what I'd like to say until next time, remember, don't trust everything you see on the internet, but trust us.